The rain had been falling since dawn, soft and steady, tracing silver veins down the cracked window of their small Brooklyn apartment. Inside, the air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and exhaustion. Ethan Walker sat at the worn kitchen table, hunched over a stack of unpaid bills, the dim yellow light flickering above him. His fingers, rough from long hours at the construction site, moved slowly, almost reverently, as he folded another letter from the electric company. Across the tiny room, Clara Evans was standing by the sink, staring blankly into the window's reflection. Her hair, once soft curls he used to tuck behind her ear, now hung straight, lifeless. She wore her old office uniform, a pale blouse that had lost its color from too many washes. "Don't forget," she said, without turning around, her voice low, flat. "We have rent due on Friday." Ethan looked up, his eyes tired but gentle. "I know. I'll take a few extra shifts this week. We'll be fine." Clara didn't answer. The word fine had become meaningless to her, something he said to patch every broken thing. Their finances, her anxiety, their marriage. It was a word too small for the weight she carried. For a while, the only sound was the rain. Ethan finally stood, walked to her side, and touched her shoulder. "Clara, look at me." She hesitated before meeting his gaze. His eyes were still that same kind, unguarded brown that had once made her believe love was enough. But now, standing in the pale kitchen light, she felt nothing, or maybe too much of something she couldn't name. "I'm trying," he said softly. "I know it's hard, but it won't always be like this." Clara's lips curved not into a smile, but something close to pity. "You always say that, Ethan. And every month, it's the same." He wanted to argue, to remind her of the times they laughed over instant noodles, how they danced in the living room when the power came back after a blackout, but he knew words wouldn't reach her anymore. There was a wall between them, invisible, but cold as glass. That night, Clara stayed late at the office. The company was hosting a small charity event downtown. Nothing special, she told herself. Just another chance for her to be around people who didn't talk about overdue bills or broken boilers. She wore a borrowed dress from a coworker, a simple navy gown that fit her better than she expected. For the first time in months, when she caught her reflection in the restroom mirror, she thought she looked like someone else. That's when she met Richard Hale. He was standing by the bar, surrounded by laughter and light. His suit was tailored perfectly. His presence filled the room in a way Ethan never could. When their eyes met, Richard smiled slow, confident, as though he already knew what she needed. "Clara Evans, right?" he said, offering a glass of champagne. "I've seen your name on the quarterly reports. You're one of the few people here who actually works." She laughed, really laughed, for the first time in a long while. His voice carried that effortless charm of a man who never had to try too hard. As they talked, Clara felt something dangerous awaken a hunger, not for him exactly, but for the life he represented. The life she once dreamed of before she said yes to a man who could barely afford a ring. Hours passed. When the event ended, Richard offered to walk her to her car. The city lights shimmered in the puddles as they stepped outside. She told him about her job, her apartment, the long nights. He listened, or at least pretended to. When he touched her arm before saying goodnight, the gesture lingered just a moment too long. That moment followed her home. Ethan was asleep on the couch when she came in. The TV still flickered with some late-night show. On the table, there was a plate covered with foil dinner he'd saved for her. The smell of reheated pasta filled the air. Clara stood there for a long time, looking at him, his hands still stained faintly with paint from the sight, his face peaceful in sleep. Something twisted inside her chest. Guilt, maybe, or resentment. She whispered to no one, "We were supposed to be happy." The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. But something subtle had shifted. She began checking her phone more often, lingering over Richard's messages that appeared like sparks in her dull days. Ethan noticed, of course. He wasn't blind, just too kind to accuse her. One night, as they sat eating in silence, he reached across the table. "You've been distant lately. Is everything okay?" She looked up, startled. "I'm just tired." "From work?" "From everything." He nodded slowly, swallowing his words. When she went to bed early, Ethan stayed up, staring at her phone lying on the counter, screen glowing faintly with a message she hadn't bothered to hide. "I couldn't stop thinking about you tonight." He didn't open it. He didn't need to. The rain began again outside, tapping against the glass. Ethan leaned back, closed his eyes, and for the first time, felt the beginning of something breaking, not loud, not dramatic, but quiet, like the slow cracking of ice beneath a frozen lake. And deep down, he already knew love alone might not be enough to save what was left of them. The following weeks moved like a dream Clara couldn't wake from, soft, luminous, and dangerously unreal. Each morning, she still rode the crowded subway to work, clutching her old leather bag, but her thoughts drifted elsewhere. To Richard Hale's voice, his cologne, the way he looked at her like she was someone worth noticing. It began innocently, or at least that's what she told herself. A few lunches that just happened, then late-night calls when she was finishing reports. She learned his laugh, his favorite whiskey, the rhythm of his life, all the things she used to know about. Ethan. Only now they belonged to someone else. At the office, Richard's presence became magnetic. He was a regional director, sharp, respected, and untouchable. Yet when he entered a room, Clara felt his gaze find her instantly, like a secret they were both pretending didn't exist. "Evans," he said one afternoon, stopping by her cubicle, "you free after work? There's a new place on Fifth. I'd rather not drink alone." Her heart thudded painfully. She should say no. She should think of Ethan waiting at home with leftover soup and soft apologies, but instead, she heard herself say yes. The restaurant was warm, golden light spilling across marble tables. Jazz played low beneath the murmur of conversations. Richard looked perfectly at ease, his jacket draped over the chair, his cufflinks glinting when he poured her a glass of wine. "To surviving another week," he said, raising his glass. Clara smiled, though her hands trembled slightly. "Barely." He watched her over the rim of his drink. "You work harder than anyone here. Tell me, what keeps you going?" The question struck something deep. She thought of Ethan, of the bills, of the nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was all life had to offer. "Hope, maybe," she said, "that one day things will be different." Richard leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Maybe you just need someone who can make it different." The words hung between them too heavy, too dangerous. Clara felt her throat tighten, but she didn't pull away when he reached for her hand. For the first time in years, she felt seen, desired. Outside, the city glowed like a fever. When he walked her to her car, he didn't ask for permission before kissing her. It was brief, electric, the kind of kiss that burned away reason. When she got home, Ethan was awake, reading on the couch. He looked up, smiling. "Hey, you're late. Everything okay?" Clara froze at the door, tasting guilt like metal. "Just a long meeting," she said, hanging her coat carefully, avoiding his eyes. He nodded, his trust unbroken, and somehow that hurt more than if he had accused her. Days became weeks. Their affair deepened, moving from quiet dinners to stolen weekends at hotels under different names. Clara learned to lie with ease, team retreats, deadlines, out-of-town projects. Ethan still kissed her every morning before leaving for work, his lips gentle, his voice calm. But the warmth between them was fading, quietly dying in plain sight. One Friday night, Ethan surprised her with dinner reservations. It had been months since they'd gone out together. I thought we could use a night for just us, he said, eyes hopeful, like we used to. Clara forced a smile, but inside panic clawed at her. She had already promised to see Richard that night. I'm sorry, Ethan, she said carefully. I have to work late. There's a new campaign rolling out. His expression flickered disappointment, then resignation. Of course, maybe another time. That same night, she met Richard in a hotel room overlooking the Hudson River. The city stretched below them, alive and glittering. She told herself she deserved this just one evening without worry, without struggle. But when he held her, whispering promises about a future she couldn't quite believe in, part of her still saw Ethan's quiet eyes. Meanwhile, Ethan had begun to notice the absences, the scent of cologne that wasn't his on her coat, the way she laughed at her phone, then quickly turned the screen away. He said nothing, not because he didn't care, but because he was afraid that naming the truth would make it real. One evening, as Clara stepped out to buy groceries, Ethan followed. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, proof or hope. But when he saw her meeting Richard outside a sleek black car, laughing like a woman he hadn't seen in years, something in him went still. Not rage, not jealousy, just an ache so deep it numbed him. He went home before she returned, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at their wedding photo. Her smile in that picture was radiant, her hand on his chest, their eyes full of belief. It looked like someone else's life now. When Clara walked in, he pretended to be asleep. She slipped quietly into bed beside him, unaware that his eyes were open, staring at the dark ceiling. He thought of the promises they had made under the autumn sky, when love seemed like enough to keep them alive. Now, all he could feel was the slow unraveling, silent, merciless, inevitable. That weekend, Ethan didn't go to work. He walked the streets of Brooklyn aimlessly, ending up by the East River. The skyline shimmered across the water, the world that never stopped, no matter who broke or fell behind. He stood there for a long time, letting the wind sting his face. In that stillness, he understood something simple but crushing. He had given her everything he could, and it wasn't enough. Somewhere in Manhattan, Clara was laughing beside another man. But here, under the gray sky, Ethan Walker began to let go one heartbeat at a time. The apartment grew quieter with every passing week, not in the way peace feels, but in the way something dies, soundlessly, in a closed room. Ethan stopped trying to fill the silence. Clara stopped pretending to notice. They spoke less now. Their words were replaced by gestures of habit, a nod in the morning, a brief touch when passing in the hallway. Even the coffee cups knew the routine. His chipped mug on the left, hers on the right, always waiting, never shared. One Sunday morning, Ethan woke early. The sun filtered through the thin curtains, painting soft lines across the floor. He watched Clara sleeping beside him, her body turned away, her breathing shallow. For a fleeting moment, he imagined things were still as they used to be, the mornings they spent tangled in laughter, the way she'd reach for his hand even, before opening her eyes. But that woman was gone. Or maybe, he thought bitterly, she had never really been here, not in the way he believed. He rose quietly and began making breakfast. It was an old ritual: eggs, toast, and the last of the strawberry jam she used to love. He knew she might not eat it, but he needed to do it anyway. Hope, he realized, was a habit that dies slower than love. When Clara finally emerged from the bedroom, she was dressed for work, or at least that's what she wanted him to think. Her hair was curled, her perfume heavier than usual. "You're up early," Ethan said, forcing a smile. She didn't meet his eyes. "I have a meeting downtown." "On Sunday?" "Yeah, the new campaign." He nodded, pretending to believe her, but his chest tightened. "Clara." She froze. Her hand, holding her purse strap, trembled slightly. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. It was such a simple question, yet it landed like a weight between them. She didn't answer right away. Her throat felt dry, her heart racing with a guilt she didn't want to name. "I don't know," she whispered. Ethan smiled sadly. "That's fair." He stepped closer, his voice calm but breaking. "I just need to know if there's still something left worth fighting for." Her eyes lifted then, and for a brief second, she almost said yes. But the image of Richard, his confidence, his promises, his world of glass and gold flashed through her mind. She looked away. "I think we both deserve to be happy," she said finally. Ethan nodded. "Even if that means apart?" Silence, the kind that answers for you. He exhaled slowly. "Okay." That afternoon, Clara met Richard at a private restaurant in Midtown. He was already there, reading his phone, a glass of scotch in hand. When he saw her, he smiled that easy, self-assured smile that made her feel like everything wrong in her life could still be rewritten. "You look beautiful," he said, rising to kiss her cheek. She smiled faintly. "I told him." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Told him what?" "About us." He leaned back, surprise flickering briefly across his face. "All right, and?" He didn't yell. He didn't even ask why. Her voice cracked a little. "He just let me go." Richard nodded slowly, studying her. "Then it's for the best. You deserve more than struggling with a man who can't give you what you need." Clara wanted to believe him. She wanted to think this pain was just the cost of chasing something better. But deep down, she knew Ethan hadn't been a burden. He'd been the one constant thing that never asked for more than her presence. "Richard," she said quietly, "promise me this is real." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "It's real if you want it to be." It sounded like a line from one of his business pitches, but she nodded anyway, because sometimes lies are easier to live with when they come wrapped in charm. That night, Ethan packed, not in anger, but with a strange calm that frightened him. He folded his shirts carefully, one by one, into an old duffel bag. The apartment, once filled with laughter and shared dreams, now felt like a museum of ghosts. He paused at the small bookshelf, the photo frames, the postcards, the memories they'd built on promises now cracked. His fingers brushed over a picture of them on Coney Island, her hair blowing wildly in the wind, her eyes alive with something pure. He almost didn't recognize her. He left the photo where it was. Some things weren't meant to travel forward. When Clara came home past midnight, the lights were dim. The suitcase by the door was the first thing she saw. Her breath caught. "Ethan, what is this?" He looked at her from the couch, his eyes calm, too calm. "I think it's time I go." She stepped closer, panic rising. "Go where?" "I don't know yet. Just somewhere else. Somewhere I can breathe again." Her voice trembled. "So that's it?" He smiled faintly. "You left a long time ago, Clara. You just forgot to pack." Tears welled in her eyes, but pride or fear kept her from breaking. She wanted to say she was sorry, but the words wouldn't come. "Take care of yourself," he said softly. Then, almost as an afterthought, "I mean that." He brushed past her, the faint scent of rain clinging to his jacket. The door clicked shut, and that was how it ended, without shouting, without goodbyes. Just two people standing on opposite sides of a silence that had been building for years. Outside, the city lights flickered like distant stars. Ethan walked down the street, his bag slung over his shoulder, the night air cold against his skin. He didn't look back. For Clara, the apartment felt impossibly empty. She sat on the couch where he'd been minutes ago, the echo of his presence haunting the room. His coffee mug was still on the table, half full, still warm. She picked it up, held it close to her chest, and for the first time in months, maybe years, she cried. But by morning, the tears were dry. She dressed, painted her lips, and walked out the door toward a life that glittered brighter, but felt nothing like home. 3 years passed. The world moved on, and so did Clara Evans, or at least, that's what she told everyone. She was now Clara Hale, fiancée to one of Manhattan's most admired businessmen. She lived in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, with glass walls and marble floors that gleamed so perfectly they never seemed real. Every morning, the skyline stretched before her like a promised silver, untouchable and cold. Her life had become everything she once dreamed of: designer dresses, charity galas, weekend trips to the Hamptons. Her name appeared in glossy magazines beside Richard's, under captions like "The Power Couple of New York." And yet sometimes, in the stillness before dawn, Clara would wake to the sound of rain soft, steady, and her heart would twist with a memory she tried to forget. A small kitchen in Brooklyn, a chipped mug, a man with tired eyes who always said, "We'll be fine." She never told Richard about those dreams. Richard Hale was not unkind. He was sharp, successful, and generous in the ways that made people adore him: expensive gifts, grand gestures, the kind of attention that demanded to be noticed. But beneath the tailored charm lay something colder, something possessive. He liked control. At first, Clara mistook it for protection, the way he'd order for her at restaurants, or insist she didn't need to work anymore. "You've earned peace," he'd say, brushing his fingers down her arm. "Let me take care of you." But peace, she discovered, had a price: silence. She missed working, missed earning her own small victories. But when she mentioned returning to her old company, Richard laughed lightly. "Darling, why would you go back there? You're beyond that now. You're my future wife. You belong here." Belong. The word sat heavy in her chest. One evening, as preparations for the wedding consumed every corner of their home, Clara found herself alone in Richard's office, a sleek, masculine space filled with dark wood, polished steel, and the faint scent of whiskey. She wasn't snooping, not at first. She just wanted to feel closer to the man she was about to marry. But as she skimmed through a folder of business contracts, a familiar name made her freeze: Walker Industries. Her pulse stuttered. She whispered it aloud, barely breathing the words. Walker? It couldn't be. There were hundreds of Walkers in New York. But the document beneath her trembling fingers was unmistakable. A merger proposal signed just months ago. Ethan Walker, CEO. She sank into the leather chair, her heart racing. Ethan? CEO? The man who once worked 12-hour shifts just to pay rent? How could this be? Footsteps in the hall made her shove the folder back into place just as Richard entered, smiling. "There you are," he said, loosening his tie. "I was beginning to think you'd run away before the wedding." Clara forced a laugh, but her voice cracked. "Just looking around." Richard walked over, poured himself a drink, and handed her one too. "You're nervous," he said, brushing a thumb along her jaw. "That's normal." She nodded, her thoughts spinning wildly. Ethan was back in New York, and somehow their lives were about to cross again. That night, she couldn't sleep. She went to the balcony. The city spread out like a sea of diamonds beneath her. Somewhere out there, Ethan was breathing the same cold air, walking the same streets. Did he hate her now? Did he ever forgive her? The memories came rushing back at his soft voice, the way he'd touch her back when she was lost in her own storms. She'd left him without even turning around. The goodbye he deserved had never happened. "Clara?" She turned sharply. Richard stood at the doorway, shirt unbuttoned, his face shadowed in the dim light. "You're still up." "Couldn't sleep," she said quietly. He walked toward her, placing his hands on her shoulders. "You're thinking too much again. Everything's fine. You have everything you've ever wanted." She wanted to believe him, but the words sounded hollow now, just like Ethan's had years ago. 2 weeks later, invitations for the wedding went out. It was to be a grand affair, hundreds of guests, top executives, even a few politicians. Richard wanted spectacle. Clara wanted simplicity. But her voice no longer mattered. The day before the ceremony, she visited the hotel where the wedding would take place. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers, the scent of roses thick in the air. She stood there for a long time, staring at the aisle she'd walked down, the stage where she'd smile for cameras. A part of her wanted to run, but where would she go? That evening, she opened her laptop, typed Ethan Walker into the search bar, and pressed enter. There he was. The articles flooded in Ethan Walker, the quiet genius behind Walker Industries' rise, from blue-collar builder to billionaire investor. The photos hit her hardest. Ethan in a charcoal suit, standing beside powerful people, his posture confident, his expression unreadable. He looked older, sharper. The softness she once knew was gone, replaced by a calm authority that made her chest ache. She closed the laptop, heart pounding. Ethan had rebuilt himself without her, and tomorrow he would see her marry another man. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and cold. Paparazzi lined the steps of the hotel, flashes bursting as luxury cars pulled in. Clara sat in the bridal suite, staring at her reflection, a vision of perfection in white silk and diamonds. But behind the beauty, her eyes were empty. "Ready, Mrs. Hale?" her makeup artist asked. Clara smiled weakly. Almost. As she stood, her bridesmaid handed her the bouquet. The door opened, and the wedding coordinator stepped in, holding a clipboard. "Mrs. Hale, we're just waiting for one last guest before we begin. A Mr. Ethan Walker. He's—" The world tilted. Clara froze, her grip on the bouquet tightening until petals crushed between her fingers. "Excuse me?" she whispered. The woman glanced at her notes. "Yes, apparently he's one of the event sponsors. Mr. Hale insisted he be given a front row seat." Clara felt her heart stop. Richard knew. And suddenly, everything, the contracts, the timing, the unreadable look in his eyes made sense. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a stage, and Ethan was walking straight into it. The ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers, each reflection dazzling and cold, a perfect illusion of happiness. Soft music played from the string quartet as guests in glittering gowns and black tuxedos murmured over champagne. Everything was orchestrated, flawless, expensive. And yet, Clara Hale stood behind the gilded doors, her heart racing like something wild trapped in a cage. The weight of her silk gown felt unbearable. Every breath she took seemed louder than the music. Outside those doors, she was about to become Mrs. Richard Hale. Inside her chest, she wasn't sure who she was anymore. Then a ripple went through the crowd. It began as whispers, soft and curious, then spread like electricity. Heads turned toward the entrance as the tall glass doors at the far end of the ballroom opened. A man stepped in. He wasn't loud or grand. He didn't need to be. He simply was. Ethan Walker. He wore a dark tailored suit that fit him perfectly, the kind worn by men who command attention without demanding it. His hair was shorter now, streaked faintly with gray at the temples. His posture was straight, his gaze steady. No trace of the man who once worked 12-hour shifts and counted change at the grocery store. The air shifted around him. Even Richard, standing at the altar, went still. Clara's fingers tightened around her bouquet until her knuckles turned white. She felt her breath leave her body, as if the world had suddenly forgotten how to move. The coordinator beside her whispered, "We can start now, Mrs. Hale." But Clara couldn't move. Not yet. Ethan walked down the center aisle, his shoes soundless against the polished marble. The whispers rose behind him like a tide. Isn't that Ethan Walker, the CEO of Walker Industries? What's he doing here? He didn't glance at them. His eyes were fixed on Richard. When he reached the front, the two men shook hands firm, deliberate, a gesture heavy with everything unspoken. "Glad you could make it," Richard said, his voice smooth but tight. "I wouldn't miss it," Ethan replied evenly. "It's not every day I attend a wedding that my company helped finance." A murmur rippled through the room. Richard's jaw flexed, but he smiled, hiding the tension behind charm. "Always a pleasure doing business with you, Walker." "Likewise." Ethan's tone was polite, but his eyes were colder than winter glass. Behind the doors, Clara finally took a step forward. The music changed, the crowd turned, and she walked slowly, deliberately down the aisle, every step a war between her body and her soul. When she lifted her gaze, she met Ethan's eyes. Time collapsed. For a brief second, the room faded the guests, the flowers, the chandeliers, until there was only him. Ethan looked at her with a calmness that terrified her. No anger, no hatred, just a stillness that said, "I've already let you go." She almost stumbled. Richard noticed. His hand tightened around hers when she reached him, his fingers like iron. "You look pale," he murmured, smiling for the cameras. "I'm fine," she whispered, her voice trembling. He leaned closer. "Then smile, darling. Everyone's watching." The ceremony began, each word echoing hollowly through the vast room. The priest's voice spoke of love, trust, forever words that once meant everything to Clara, now sharp as glass against her heart. When the priest said, "If anyone here knows of a reason these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace," a tense stillness fell. Every eye darted to Ethan. He didn't move. Instead, he simply turned his gaze to Clara one last time and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, the kind that said, "You made your choice." And somehow, that silent acknowledgement hurt more than any accusation could have. Clara swallowed hard, her throat burning. Richard slipped the ring onto her finger, his smile perfectly practiced. Cameras flashed, the audience applauded. The music swelled, and still, she felt nothing. After the ceremony, the ballroom transformed into a reception laughter, clinking glasses, the hum of polite conversation. Clara played her part flawlessly, smiling for photos, accepting congratulations, but she could feel Ethan's presence like a pulse across the room. Finally, near the end of the evening, she found him standing alone by the terrace doors, a glass of whiskey in his hand, the city lights behind him. She hesitated, then walked toward him. "Ethan," she said softly. He turned, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Hale." The name cut deeper than she expected. "You didn't have to come." "I know." He took a slow sip, then set the glass down. "But I thought it'd be poetic." "Poetic?" she echoed bitterly. "You mean cruel." He studied her quietly. "Cruel was when you left without a word. When I woke up and half my life was gone." Her breath caught. "I thought you hated me." "I did," he admitted, "for a long time. But hate fades, Clara, especially when you realize some people were never meant to stay." She blinked hard, tears threatening. "You've changed." "So have you," he said gently. "Except, you don't look happy." Her voice trembled. "I'm fine." He smiled faintly. "You always were a terrible liar." They stood there, the city stretching endlessly before them, the same city that had once crushed them both in different ways. "Why did you help him?" she finally asked. "Richard, the merger, the sponsorship. Why?" Ethan's gaze turned distant. "Because I wanted to see something for myself." "What?" "If you ever looked at him," he said quietly,
the way you once looked at me." Clara froze. "And?" she whispered. He looked at her for a long, aching moment, then turned away. "You didn't." The silence that followed was heavier than any goodbye. He finished his drink, set the glass down, and gave her one last look. "Take care, Clara. I mean that." Then he walked away steady, unhurried, as if the years between them had already closed. She wanted to call out, to stop him, to say she was sorry, but her throat wouldn't move.
Her heart wouldn't let her. When the doors closed behind him, the world resumed laughter, music, applause, but none of it reached her. For everyone else, the night was a celebration. For Clara, it was the moment she realized that wealth could buy every illusion except peace. Morning sunlight spilled across the vast marble floors of the Hale estate, golden, beautiful, and cold. The place looked like something out of an architectural magazine. White walls, glass panels, a staircase that curved like a sculpture. Everything gleamed. Everything was silent. Clara sat at the breakfast table, staring at a cup of untouched coffee. The steam had faded long ago, leaving only a thin, bitter scent. Across from her, Richard read the Wall Street Journal. He didn't look up when he spoke. "Press wants a quote about the wedding," he said. "They're calling it the Union of the Year." Clara murmured, "Let them write whatever they want." Richard's voice hardened slightly. "You're a Hale now, Clara. What they write does matter." She didn't answer. Her eyes wandered toward the window where the city skyline shimmered in the distance, untouchable and endless. For a fleeting moment, she remembered another morning like this one. A tiny apartment, cracked walls, sunlight on second-hand furniture. Ethan sitting across from her, laughing over burnt toast. It felt like another lifetime. Richard folded his paper neatly. "You're distracted. Again." "I didn't sleep well," she said. "You should start adjusting," he replied. "We have a charity gala tonight. It's important you look rested." "Another one?" He looked at her, then really looked at her, and for a moment his expression softened. "This is our world now, Clara. It's what you wanted." Her lips trembled before she could stop them. "Is it?" The day passed in slow fragments, fittings, meetings, stylists, reporters, everything scheduled to the minute, every smile rehearsed. Clara moved through it like a ghost wearing her own skin. At noon, she stood before the mirror in her dressing room while her makeup artist adjusted her hair. Her reflection stared back, flawless, distant, unfamiliar. "Mrs. Hale," the woman said cheerfully, "you're glowing." Clara forced a smile. "Thank you." But when the woman left, she stared at herself for a long time, her perfect skin, her diamond necklace, the small tremor in her hands. She whispered, "I don't even know who you are anymore." The silence answered. That evening, the gala glittered like something out of a movie. Photographers flashed as the couple stepped from their limousine, Clara radiant in gold silk, Richard in black tuxedo, his hand resting firmly on her waist. Inside, the ballroom buzzed with laughter and money conversations about investments, stocks, philanthropy. Richard thrived in it, charming investors with his practiced charisma. Clara drifted beside him, her smile automatic, her heart elsewhere. Then she heard it, a voice, low, warm, familiar. Her heart stopped. She turned, and there he was, Ethan. He stood near the bar, surrounded by executives. The lights caught the sharp lines of his face, the calm confidence in his stance. He wasn't supposed to be here, not again. He saw her before she could look away. Their eyes met brief, electric. She felt her chest tighten, the noise of the room fading to nothing. He gave a polite nod, then returned to his conversation. Clara exhaled shakily. "Clara," Richard's voice snapped her back. "You're pale. What's wrong?" Nothing, she said too quickly. I just need some air. She slipped out to the balcony overlooking the city. The night air was cool, sharp. Below, traffic lights blinked like a pulse. Behind her, the door opened again. Running away from the crowd? Ethan's voice. She turned, her throat tightening. Why are you here? He stepped closer, his tone calm. Business. Hale Industries and Walker Corp. Are officially partnering. Richard didn't tell you? She shook her head slowly. He didn't mention you'd be at the gala. Maybe he thought I wouldn't show. Their eyes met again, and for a heartbeat, it felt like the years between them had folded back into one moment, two people in love, standing in the kitchen of a small apartment, promising forever. You shouldn't have come, she whispered. He smiled faintly. You said that last time, too. This isn't... Her voice cracked. You're married to your work now. I'm married to... Richard, he finished. Yes, I noticed. The wind picked up, brushing against her hair. Ethan, she said, softer now. Why are you doing this? Showing up in my life again, after everything? He hesitated. Maybe I needed to see it with my own eyes. See what? That I don't love you anymore. Her breath caught, a small, sharp sound. He looked away, exhaling slowly. But standing here, I realize I was wrong. Silence. He met her eyes again, and there was no accusation there, only truth. You still make it hard to forget, Clara. Tears burned her eyes, though she blinked them back. You think I don't suffer? You think I haven't regretted? The door burst open. Clara! Richard's voice cut through the night, cheerful but edged. There you are. I've been looking for you. Ethan stepped back instantly, mask in place. Mr. Hale, he greeted evenly. Walker, Richard said smoothly, though his eyes flicked between them, calculating. Didn't realize you two were catching up. Clara forced a small laugh, just congratulating him on the partnership. Of course. Richard's arm slid around her waist, possessive, controlled. Shall we? She nodded, though her heart screamed no. Ethan gave a faint smile. Enjoy your evening, Mrs. Hale. The title, again, like a blade hidden in silk. As he walked away, Richard leaned close to her ear. Care to tell me what that was about? Nothing, she whispered. Good, he said, his smile thin, because I don't like surprises. That night, when the gala was over and the city slept, Clara lay awake in the mansion's darkened bedroom. Richard's steady breathing filled the silence beside her. She stared at the ceiling, her heart aching. In the distance, thunder rolled low and faint. She thought of Ethan's eyes, of the quiet sadness behind his words. And for the first time since the wedding, she whispered into the dark, I married the wrong man. Outside, lightning flashed across the sky, brief, blinding, gone. The next morning arrived gray and heavy, the kind of light that makes the world look like it's holding its breath. Rain streaked down the tall windows of the Hale mansion, each drop tracing silent paths down glass that looked too clean to touch. Clara sat at her vanity, her reflection pale and distant. Her eyes were rimmed faintly red, though she had tried to hide it with powder. On the table beside her was a delicate envelope, cream paper, sealed but unmarked. It had been slipped under her study door sometime after dawn. No name, no return address. But the handwriting, elegant, controlled, unmistakable, was Ethan's. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. She hesitated only a second before breaking the seal. Clara, I wasn't going to write this. You don't owe me anything, and I don't owe you closure. But after seeing you again twice now, I realized silence is sometimes more cruel than honesty. You once told me that love was supposed to feel safe. You were wrong, and so was I. Love isn't safe. It's not comfortable or logical or kind. It's the thing that tears down everything you thought you were and shows you who you really are. When you left, I hated you. But now I understand you weren't running away from me. You were running from the version of yourself that believed love could survive hunger, bills, exhaustion, and fear. Maybe I would have run too. I built a life from the ashes you left behind. It looks perfect on paper, but it's quieter than I imagined. Every victory tastes like something's missing. I came to your wedding to convince myself I'd stopped caring. But when you looked at me, I remembered everything. And that's not your fault. It's mine. Don't worry, I won't come again. I won't haunt you. I just wanted to leave this where it belongs. In your hands, not between us. Be happy, Clara, even if it's not with me. Ethan. Clara read the words 3 times before she could breathe again. Each line was like a wound reopening quiet, clean, deliberate. She folded the letter carefully, almost reverently, and pressed it to her chest. Then she closed her eyes and let herself cry, not with the wildness of regret, but with the stillness of someone realizing that what's lost can never be rebuilt, no matter how much you wish it could. Downstairs, the mansion was alive with the hum of staff and schedules. Richard's assistant stood by the kitchen island, discussing plans for the next investor brunch. Richard himself entered, sharp in a navy suit, phone pressed to his ear. He glanced at Clara as he passed, but didn't pause. His voice was clipped, efficient. Tell the board I'll review the projections before noon, and make sure Walker's office knows we'll need the revised terms by Friday. The name hit her like a spark in dry air. Walker. Ethan. She swallowed hard. You're still negotiating with his company? Richard ended the call, slipping the phone into his pocket. Of course. Walker Industries is essential to the deal. She hesitated. Do you like him? Richard poured himself coffee, his smile thin. He's ambitious, strategic, the kind of man I'd hire or destroy depending on which way the wind blows. There was something in his tone that made her uneasy. What does that mean? It means, Richard said smoothly, men like Ethan Walker don't get to win forever. He left the room, the echo of his shoes sharp against marble. That evening, Clara sat alone in the study. The rain hadn't stopped. Outside, the garden shimmered under gray light, heavy with water. She unfolded Ethan's letter again, tracing the lines with her fingertip. She could hear his voice in every word, calm, steady, achingly kind. The kind of voice that used to tell her everything would be okay, even when it wasn't. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Unknown. You shouldn't trust him. She frowned, confused. Clara. Who is this? No response. Her pulse quickened. She read the message again. The words were simple, but something about them, their certainty, sent a chill through her. She locked her phone, slipped Ethan's letter into a drawer, and turned the key. 2 days later, the news hit. A headline flashed across the financial networks. Walker Industries under investigation for data breach allegation source tied to Hale Holdings. Clara's stomach dropped as she read it. The article claimed Ethan's company had mishandled client data, a scandal big enough to damage his reputation, maybe even destroy him. She stormed into Richard's office, heart pounding. You did this, didn't you? Richard didn't look up from his laptop. I have no idea what you mean. You leaked it, she said. You said men like him don't get to win forever. He smiled faintly, closing the laptop. Business is war, Clara. Don't act shocked. He doesn't deserve this. He's competition, Richard said simply. And you're my wife. You should remember what side you're on. Her voice broke. You think I care about sides? You're ruining someone's life. He stood then, slow and deliberate.
Careful, Clara. People might start wondering why you're defending him so passionately.
The air thickened. Their eyes locked, his cold, hers burning. She whispered, "You'll regret this." Richard smiled again. "No, darling, he will." That night, Clara couldn't sleep. The city outside pulsed with stormlight and sirens. She sat by the window, her mind replaying every word of the letter, every memory of Ethan's quiet strength. She wanted to reach out, to warn him, to apologize, but the fear of Richard's power, of the eyes watching her every move, held her still. She pressed her hand against the glass, the rain cold beneath her palm. "Ethan," she whispered, voice trembling, "please, don't let him break you." Thunder rolled again, low and distant like the sound of something approaching, something that would change everything. 3 weeks later, New York City glowed under a sky the color of steel. The storm had passed, but the air still carried the weight of it, humid, heavy, restless. Clara stood in her office at the Hale Foundation headquarters, staring blankly at the skyline beyond the glass walls. From this height, the city looked clean and perfect, all lines and light. But below, she knew, there were cracks everywhere, much like her own life. On the desk in front of her lay a stack of newspapers. Every headline screamed the same story. Ethan Walker cleared of all wrongdoing, Hale Holdings under ethics review. She traced her fingers over the print, her pulse fluttering. It had all turned. The investigation that was meant to bury Ethan had backfired. Someone inside Hale Holdings had leaked evidence emails, contracts, internal memos proving that Richard's team had fabricated data to destroy him. And now, Richard was the one under fire. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "He survived. You were right to believe in him." She didn't need to ask who it was. The elevator chimed behind her. "Still reading about your hero?" Richard's voice was low, sharp. She turned. He looked different now, tired, his tie loosened, his once perfect calm fraying around the edges. "I was reading about you," she said quietly. He smirked. "The press loves a scandal. It'll pass." "Will it?" Clara asked softly. "Because Ethan didn't just clear his name. He's pressing charges. Against you. Personally." Richard stepped closer, his jaw tightening. "You knew about this?" "I didn't have to," she replied. "I just knew you'd go too far." His hand slammed down on the desk, the papers scattering like frightened birds. "You think he's innocent? That he didn't use you? Wake up, Clara. You were a stepping stone for both of us." Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed steady. At least he never lied about who he was. For the first time, Richard's composure cracked. His voice dropped into a growl. "You really think he still cares about you? He's using your guilt. That's what good men do. They make you feel like the villain until you crawl back." Clara straightened, her hands trembling but firm. "Maybe, but I'd rather crawl back to something real than stand beside a man made of glass." For a moment, there was only silence. Then Richard laughed soft, disbelieving. "You're done here," he said. "Don't come back to this office again." She looked at him one last time. "You're right," she whispered. "I'm done pretending." And she walked out, not fast, not dramatic, just steady, like a woman finally learning how to breathe. That evening, rain began to fall again. The city blurred behind streaks of water on the taxi window. Clara sat quietly, her hands clasped in her lap, Ethan's letter folded in her purse like a secret heartbeat. She didn't know where she was going until the driver asked, "Destination, ma'am?" She hesitated, then said softly, "Walker Industries." Ethan's office was on the 47th floor of a downtown tower, all glass and steel, the kind of place that looked built to touch the clouds. She didn't have an appointment. She didn't have a plan. But when she stepped into the lobby, the receptionist looked up and said, He's expecting you. Her breath caught. Moments later, the elevator doors opened, and she saw him standing near the window, the city glowing behind him like fire and fog. "Clara," he said simply. For a long time, neither spoke. Then she whispered, "You knew I'd come?" He smiled faintly. "No, but I hoped." She stepped closer, her eyes glistening. "I read what they did to you, what he did. I'm so sorry." "I know," he said quietly, "and it's over." "Is it?" He looked at her, really looked, and for a heartbeat she saw all the years between them collapse again. The laughter, the fights, the long nights when they had nothing but each other. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe some things never end. They just change shape." Tears welled in her eyes. "I shouldn't have left. I thought I wanted more, but all I did was lose everything that mattered." Ethan's gaze softened. "You didn't lose everything. You just forgot who you were." She took a shaky breath. "And who am I now?" He hesitated, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a worn, yellowed piece of paper, a lease agreement dated years ago, their first apartment. The address scrawled in faded ink. He placed it on the desk between them. "That's where you started to believe in something real," he said. "Maybe that's where you find yourself again." Clara stared at it, her throat tightening. "You kept this?" "I kept too much," he admitted with a small smile. "But maybe I needed a reminder of what love looks like before it turns into ambition." The silence stretched not awkward, but fragile, sacred. Finally she whispered, "Do you still love me, Ethan?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes searched hers, full of all the things neither of them could undo. "I don't know if love is the word anymore," he said at last. "But you're the only person I've never been able to forget." Her tears fell then quiet, honest. She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. For the first time in years, she felt something like peace. Weeks later, the tabloids would say the Hales separated quietly, that Clara left the mansion with nothing but a suitcase and a small inheritance. Richard's empire began to crumble piece by piece until even his name lost its shine. Ethan never commented publicly on the scandal. He disappeared from the headlines, retreating from the chaos he'd helped survive. But some nights, in a small brownstone on the edge of Brooklyn, lights would burn late into the night, 2 cups of coffee cooling on the table. Laughter soft and human behind the curtains. They never remarried. They never promised forever again. But they found something far rarer: forgiveness. On a quiet morning months later, Clara sat by the window of that small apartment, sunlight spilling across her bare hands. She looked at Ethan, reading across the room, his glasses slipping slightly down his nose, and smiled. Maybe love wasn't about beginnings or endings. Maybe it was about returning again and again to the place where your heart first learned how to feel. And when Ethan looked up, meeting her gaze, the world felt silent again, but this time, not from loss, from peace.